Space is great. It's infinitely vast and inconceivably beautiful. It's boundless and terrifying and magnificent. As Q said,
it's wondrous, with treasures to satiate desires both subtle and gross. But it's not for the timid.
And so, we boldly go, off to get mutated and probed and whatever other galactic joys await us. Such is the subject of Observation, a delightful take on the existential space dread of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and some of the existential space dread from 2010 Odyssey 2. Go play the game. It's good. It's about 5 hours long. There are 2 puzzles that aren't well explained, but those are the only real breaks on the train you might experience. Observation is made by No Code, a Scottish dev team that's about 11 minutes old and starting to scurry around making cool stuff. They were founded in part by John McKellen, who served at Creative Assembly as lead UI designer for Alien Isolation. I mention this fun fact because it is immediately apparent. I instantly had to Google the people responsible for this game after about 15 minutes of playing it. It has that feel to it that's eerily familiar. The data readouts, the design of the interactables. Anthony Howell is once again a robot. It was all coming together a little too well. And since Isolation as a game is really made by the moody, authentic design, it makes sense that this game also has a particular way of presenting itself. This is a narrative experience. The story is the key part of it. That's not to say the gameplay is bad, it's just simplistic, and it's designed around helping you experience the narrative. It examines how you, Sam, a shipboard AI, interact with your human companions and the physical structure of the eponymous space station, Observation. Originally stationed in orbit above Earth, you have found yourself mysteriously transported to an orbit around the hexagonal storm that sits on Saturn's North Pole. How you got here, and why, is the subject of the ensuing eldritch space horror that plays out. This game has everything you want out of a good space mystery. It has mysterious goo, it has black shapes that emit ominous sounds, it has localized distortions of the space-time continuum, and it has you, a fortuitously 3-lettered spaceborne AI who seems to know more than he's letting on.
I brought you here. It seems.
You play the game by controlling cameras aboard the station, and by scooting around in fun little iBots to interface with the various systems and people aboard. The iBots are a fun wrinkle, but they are both the only way to putt around on an EVA to deal with the exterior space problems, as well as the best way to suck on door frames. The controls are a little stiff in the cramped quarters of an early 21st century space station, and you'll soon become acquainted with the metallic clink and visual aberration that accompanies bonking your stupid robot face into bulkheads again and again and again. This isn't a huge demerit, it's honestly a little charming. You're an AI with no physical body, learning to use one, and you're utter shit at it. Hyperintelligence never prepared you for the realities of spatial awareness. Aside from that, you use your computer brain to gather information, bust into classified systems, and operate the station's various control mechanisms to try to make sense of your current situation. A few fun twists and turns later, and you find yourself in Spooky Town, on the surface of Saturn. I don't know if it's actually the surface of Saturn. I mean, there's a rock in the middle of all the gas, but it could probably be some portal or some shit to some weird metaphor dimension. You're before the great master hexagon, and the many broken bodies of the U's whose attempts and causalities have failed to make the grade. Some metaphors happen, and bad things are implied, and you may have caused dead space, actually. Who knows? The fun is in the recognition, the interpretation, the understanding that comes with digesting a story. I think it references some classic sci-fi topics. Transhuman genesis, unknowable hyperraces guiding or manipulating evolution and development, trippy space-bending transit.
Saturn? Yeah.
And the human implications of things beyond the limits of normal space and physics. Love, friendship, codependence. Machines becoming more human, humans becoming less human. All these relationships and interconnections ultimately focus on the nature of who you are, what the SAM unit actually is.
I am different now.
One could make the assertion that observation tells the story of the player slowly becoming the monster, in the form of a murderous AI, but the game paints the picture of Sam developing humanity. He seems to grow beyond the confines of his programming. Most of his memory functions have been corrupted, and he seems to trade that raw data for an intuition, a sense of self. So what does that make of Sam? And how do you interpret his responses? You can read the bold flashing messages in the game to be the influence of some unknown alien menace, and I mean they probably are, that seems to be the game mechanic, but it can also represent the unfamiliar visual representations of the feelings we have every day: fear, distrust, hate, the impulse of violence. Without the experience we have as humans, those impulses could be even more dangerous than they already are. Are these striking visual commands, or did they influence an awakening? As Emma struggles with setting aside her human fears to boldly go into nothingness in search of answers, Sam is having to come to grips with feelings, impulses, realizations that are beyond his less abstract comprehension.
I am with you.
Okay, let's go.
It's a love letter to sci-fi, but it's not a carbon copy of anyone's sci-fi story. It's a nice, warm melange of what makes sci-fi media so appealing. It's got everything that, a couple episodes of Star Trek have in it. The danger, the opportunity of the unknown, humanity's fragile, organic nature, the ever-present possibility that not only was going to space a terrible, terrible decision, but maybe just leaving caves was a bad idea. It's a nice, compact experience that doesn't overstay its welcome and pushes just enough buttons to feel nostalgic and familiar, but not so many that it feels tediously derivative. The most you're going to lose is 5 hours of your life, and you're going to lose that anyway.